Welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today, we're joined by Dr. Yong from the Biz Lab, and I really appreciate her coming out and sharing the journey that she's been on to date with her co-founder, Yvette, and talk about how they're trying to drive change and improvement in accelerators and incubators to drive more success rates in founders and startups. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Tell me a bit about you. So it's always important for the listeners out there to understand who you are, your background, and how you got to the Biz Lab.
So I'm Dr. Yong and I'm currently based in Singapore. Hot and humid now.
Yes, it's very hot and humid. Opposite to Melbourne. Melbourne's cold and gloomy, and the heater's full, going full blast.
So I started my career as a tax accountant in Arthur Andersen many years ago. And then after 3 years, I decided to have a career change. And then I went to UNSW to do a master's degree in organisational behaviour. And then I came back and spent 15 years in Accenture, Singapore, where I focused on managing large-scale IT transformation, specifically in the area of change management. And after 15 years, I decided to take a career break where I did PhD in Singapore Management University. And after that, I started teaching in a couple of universities in Singapore. And the area of that I teach is in entrepreneurship, innovation to startups as well as business owners. At that time, I also became a business owner myself. So I co-founded the Biz Lab with Yvette, who is my partner in crime. This company called the Biz Lab is focused on helping incubators and accelerators elevate startup outcomes using data insights.
So from a data insight perspective, let's dig in a little bit there, because it's also important to understand how that might come together. You mentioned you've got some tools behind this that also support the ecosystem and the accelerators and incubators.
Yeah, so the Biz Lab has got 3 tools, and later on we'll talk a little bit of what are the roles of these 3 tools. So the first tool that we have is a very fun diagnostic tool called the Startup Zodiac. So this Startup Zodiac is a tool which allows founders to get some sense of startup realism. So basically it helps founders to assess the alignment between their business model potential and their growth aspiration. So I mean, a very scalable, fast tech kind of business, the growth trajectory will be then different from, say, an F&B or a coaching kind of business. So it's to give founders a kind of reality check. And in addition, we also check whether they have the cash flow awareness to carry through their vision of the business model. So that's our first tool. And startups as well as incubators and accelerators can use that. So incubators and accelerators can use that for segmentation purpose of their founders. The second tool that we have is called the Quick Look Cash Flow and Valuation tool. So basically this tool is a structured way for startup founders to create and develop their cash flow, their strategic cash flow projections. So we have key insights and ratios that investors typically look out for. We also show sensitivity analysis because a lot of founders have confidence bias. So they will think that their baseline case is the only case that will happen. But generally, it's not so. So we have sensitivity analysis.
Yeah, as founders, we're always in a positive light, right? So everything's going to work out, but you need to understand that not everything's going to go to plan sometimes. We need a plan B, C, and D sometimes.
Yeah, we always need. I don't think that there is any business that started and progressed in the original way that it was conceived.
Yeah, I don't. If people haven't started a business, you don't understand that reality. You're always flying by the seat of your pants, as they might say, and changing things as you go. And it's evolving. Business models change, customers change, needs change. Even your customer target might change. Everything can iterate. Your core product could change. So there is a lot in that we need to think about when you're starting a business.
Yeah. And actually, that's a good segue to the third tool, which is called a growth simulator. So, because there can be many scenarios to drive growth, so this tool really itemizes the parameters of growth, like your cost of customer acquisition, what's your retention profile, etc. And it allows the founders to do a paper exercise and kind of de-risk even at an early stage and kind of think through what scenarios they want to have to drive the growth. So Growth Simulator actually complements the quick look cash flow and valuation tool in terms of building out a game plan for the founders before they kind of hit the road.
So, in terms of those tools, you're mostly focused at founder levels. What's the intent? So, how do we support accelerators and incubators with this? Obviously, the businesses need to be assessed and go through those tools and understand themselves a little bit better, how they might position, understand cash flow, understand their dynamics in their business, because every business is different, right? So, how does that lean into the startup ecosystem to support accelerators and incubators?
Hey, thanks, Andrew. That's a great question. So I'm going to take a step back and share a little bit about how we even stumbled upon this business in the first place and what is our aspiration. And then I'll talk about how these tools and data actually supports incubators and accelerators. So when we worked with startups who belong to incubators and accelerators, we asked the question of are incubators and accelerators actually measuring the relationship between the activities that they are doing for the startup founders and the success of the startup founders. And after we spoke to a lot of people, Australia, Singapore, and all over the world, and we also dug into a lot of research, we found that there was a gap, that incubators and accelerators are measuring something. They are measuring pitch nights, they are measuring investor lists, they are measuring the size of funds that they raise. But there is no clear correlation to the outcomes, the either the success rate of the founders within the duration of that they are in the establishment or thereafter. So we thought about it, and we realized that actually there are actually two parts of the puzzle. What the incubators and accelerators are kind of measuring are what I call the supply side matrix. So these supply side matrix are the activities that are being applied onto the founders.
Potentially, there might even be lead generation for the incubator, especially the pitch nights, etc. They're really lead funnels, if you think about it that way.
Exactly. So there is a purpose to it, but the question is, how does it then eventually lead to the outcome or success of the founders? So we thought that, hey, actually, we may need to work on the absorption of the founders. How can they better absorb the interventions that these incubators and accelerators are giving to them, whether by means of mentoring, coaching, all these activities, exposure to investors, etc. Because in my training as a change management professional, I realized that change happens at the speed of consumption or absorption. So if you don't deal with the absorption, which is the demand side, then you will have a lot of leakage. So there are a lot of activities done, a lot of noise, but the question is, to what extent is it helpful? So we then thought about, hey, how can we help incubators and accelerators really flesh out the absorption of the founders? So there are two things that we found, and I'm then going to link it to how the tools are going to support that. So the first is around segmentation. So I mean, as business owners ourselves, right, we are big on segmenting our customers. Hey, who are the people we should target? What kind of strategy should we go with them? Who we do not want to target, etc. So likewise, we are suggesting that incubators and accelerators segment their startup founders, and they could use our tools, they could use other people's tools, but basically is to have clarity of who they are working with so that they can apply the correct or tailored interventions to these startup founders. So the Startup Zodiac tool I mentioned to you just now is such a tool that they can use either at the screening phase or as the startup founders come through. So it's self-assessment, and incubators and accelerators get the data. It's non-confrontational because it's not other people assessing the founder, but the founder assessing themselves. So with all these data, the incubator and accelerator can better segment the founders. So that's number one.
On that,
I'm just going to take a pause before I move to number
just
two.
digging into that segmentation in the world of how you might segment a startup. How are you looking at that? Because it could be industry specific, it could be business model specific, it could be by the founder's experience, it could be in many molds there. It could be quite difficult. How do you approach that?
Andrew, really thanks for that question. So the answer to that question is really linked to how we set up this diagnostic survey. So as I mentioned just now, Startup Zodiac aims to achieve a purpose, which is to understand how the business model potential of a startup aligns with its growth aspiration, and also whether this founder has the cash flow awareness to carry through that vision. So with the segmentation, this tool is fun because the results is summarized in 7 animals. Okay? So out of 3 categories.
I think the Zodiac makes sense. So putting some animals behind it, that's very clever. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have transformative animals, which is gazelle for fast tech, camel for deep tech, and emperor penguin for those who want to grow at all costs, because the female emperor penguin will lay an egg and just throw it to the male emperor penguin to take care. So we think that's like similar. Then there is another category, which is for incrementally transformative businesses, which is like your F&B, and but there are also people who are more global, which is like Uniqlo, for example. But these are not those extremely transformative or disruptive ideas, but yet they can have a good living. The third category is the cannot make it category. So it will be donkeys who are bleeding cash, and cockroach, which is just operationally break even but will never be profitable. So with all these attributes that the incubator and accelerator collects about the startup founders, they are able to give them the right kind of intervention. So for example, if this startup self-assess that, hey, I'm actually a fast tech, a highly disruptive, then the kind of intervention, for example, who you connect these people to, the kind of programs that you introduce to these people would be different from if this is like a maybe incrementally transformative kind of startup.
Very different, right? If you're looking, especially at capital side, the capital is going to be different. The person having a conversation is going to be different.
Exactly.
I like how you said cash flow awareness in the conversation, because likelihood they don't have the cash right now, so they need to be aware of what we might need along the journey, because it is a journey, and if we don't really understand what it could look like or how we're going to fund it, it becomes quite problematic. We hit a roadblock, and then where do we go from there? So the cockroach, though, that the donkey, you don't want to be rated there. So if you're in that sort of business, it's potentially maybe let's look at something else.
Yeah, exactly. So it's important for us to understand the commercials implication upfront, because otherwise we will be spending a lot of time and energy and even emotions. And then in the end, we realize, hey, actually, it's not something viable, but maybe we could have known it earlier.
Yes.
So that was kind of that intent that we wanted to have for the startup founders. But the incubators and accelerators can also use this to apply more targeted intervention on the founders that come their way.
That makes sense. In your finding of discussions with incubators and accelerators, do they lean on this anyway in terms of we're looking for this particular type of business, or do they generally support a vast variety and they're not really segmenting quite well, which you found as a problem?
Most of the incubators and accelerators we speak with and work with already have their own methodology of how to screen applicants. So we are in conversations with some startup venture studio to incorporate the screening of the applicants using the startup Zodiac. But the more established incubators and accelerators find it very difficult to incorporate that at the screening stage. However, these institutions are then incorporating this startup Zodiac in the education part. So as they educate the startup founders, startup realism, what are the different kinds of business and what are the expected growth trajectory, then we will introduce the tool and collect the data at that point in time.
That makes sense because, sometimes changing the onboarding process can be a bit more tricky and difficult, and how do they assess within the bigger scheme of things. So bringing it into education is important for the founder to realise that potentially we got the wrong model and we need to think about it differently depending on what we're targeting, what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think the challenge that we also face when we interact with the incubators and accelerators is information asymmetry. So they need to have a very good reason of why they need to adopt our tools. And we also need to show them the data to convince them that, hey, actually, there is a lot of value. And it really positions them well to justify the value add that they are putting on for the startup founders, the supply side.
Yeah, because you need to be adding value to the founders. If you're not, then what's the point of the whole exercise? It becomes a learning exercise, and what are we getting from it from a founder perspective? So that's important for everyone to know that we are delivering value and we are hitting the right mark in terms of the accelerators and incubators. A question for you. Along your journey, what sort of this is success rates of accelerators and incubators? I only from hearsay have heard different opinions about going through these sort of processes. What have you found within the accelerator and incubator and the success rates of founders coming out of there?
Okay, based on literature, as I mentioned, the verdict is still out there. I think based on my personal experience, the journey is still very, very, very long for founders if they went through it at the early stage. So a lot of founders, because they need help, workspaces, they need the assistance program, funding from government, etc. So they found themselves in these incubators and accelerators. The programs give them a good foundation, but based on my personal experience, actually, the resilience of the founder and the motivation of the founder to really make something out of that business, I think is critical.
Like we said earlier, business is a long, long journey, and if you don't have resilience or willing to stick to it for years, not months, it's not going to work. That's the reality. So if you're going into an incubator thinking you're going to try something for a few months in between a job, don't bother. That's my opinion. You're probably just wasting your time. You need like you said, some resilience and some passion behind the project to really drive you, because it's not going to be easy. There's going to be times where you don't know how to pay the bills. There's going to be times where you might have to cut team because things aren't working. There's going to be times where you have a success rate and you win a big customer and then things are all chirpy. And there's going to be times where you lose customers and things aren't going in the right direction. Competitors are going to come on board. There's so many things that are going to be impacted. It's a business in the end that anything can go wrong. And what 90% of businesses fail effectively. And if you're in a tech startup, that's probably even higher. So yeah, it's a challenging space. So like you said, resilience, and the founder becomes more of the founders, co-founders become more attached to what the success might look like rather than a program that's going to educate you. That's my thoughts as well. But it's really the person behind that's driving it.
Yeah, and therefore, when I work with all these incubators, accelerators, and the founders that come through the program, I feel that we can do a little bit more, as I mentioned earlier, to increase the absorption rate. Because the incubators and accelerators will be one of the few establishments that forms a longer and more sustained touch point to the founder. So it is important that they play a role of educating the startup founders as much as they possibly can, because I mean, you can't have too much too soon. So as much as they possibly can at that stage, so that the founders are equipped with the right tools and the right mindset as they progress in their journey. So when the interesting feedback that I always get when we talk to startups and the incubators, they'll be like, oh, numbers, we don't talk about numbers too early because it's still early stage. We're talking about product market fit. So we always say it's not about your numbers, it's about your game plan, because numbers is just a manifestation of your game plan. So if you don't even have a structure to think about your business assumptions, then it's very risky for you because you are just kind of like poking in the dark, and it can take a long time. The darkness can be for a long time.
And you need a plan, and you got to try and execute that plan too. Like if you're getting to a point where you can product market fit, yes, but then we're going to throw some pricing models at people and test if people are willing to buy. There's different layers to that, so you have to test. You can't just sit and assume forever as well. So it's more testing in my mind. The more incrementally testing we are on every facet of it, from a business model, from the product market fit, from the people, from everything, you need to be continuously testing and evolving.
I think this is what you said triggered another thinking about a common feedback that we get. So a lot of the incubators and founders also say, yeah, we're focused on testing and product market fit. I actually push them to think about it one step more, which is even if you had product market fit, what is your go-to-market strategy? It's like you have a choice of B2C, B2B, B2B2C, etc. What is your choice? And I think a lot of that then boils down into, okay, so what may be the commercial implication of choosing the various segment? And we definitely want to choose one that has maybe a higher chance of,
Success rate, yeah, we're trying. Yeah, we want to be successful, right? So, what's going to be the easiest to get to
yeah,
market? B2C, you might need more marketing, advertising dollars. B2B,
yeah,
slower buying cycle, and then you might have partner networks that you're going to drive this through. So, there's many different models, and you might have to implement multiple of them, but you can't start with multiple at the
yeah.
start anyway. You got to stick with one for a bit, test it, evolve it, and keep going.
Yeah. So the no, no, exactly correct. So I think it's having that big picture view of, okay, this is my lean experimentation. I'm going to test out this market and I'm going to test A, B, C, D of this market. Uh, Whether it works, doesn't work, let me go to the next one. But they can't just be testing in the blind. There needs to be clarity of what they are looking out for commercially, how big the market size should be, what should be the rough cost of customer acquisition in order for them to be sustainably profitable. So I think all these questions need to be addressed or be planned to be addressed as they go through the exercise. So this is also what I mean earlier in terms of if we have a structured way for them to think through this through means of the quick look cash flow tool, through the growth simulator, then at least there's a boundary for them to think about. Otherwise, it's very daunting for the early founders, right? To say, oh, I already have product market fit testing and stuff up till my neck, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with numbers. So we just want to make it easy and friendly for people to understand this.
Yeah, and I've felt that. So we've I've been in business for 16 years, to give you the context. It's mostly a development consulting business that we operate. But then we run a SaaS product in pharmacy that took us probably 3 to 4 years to get traction and proper traction in the Australian market. So, and it takes time to get what's the product fit, what's the direction, who you integrate with. These are other questions to actually
Yeah.
drive more channel partners, etc. So all these come up, and if you can think about them earlier, it probably saves you a couple of years, right? The earlier you can think about these, the better. But yeah, and as you go through incremental improvement in business, you might come up with new products. So we're just launching a new product at the moment and going through similar things like how do we drive this? Do we commercialize it? Do we keep it internal? There's a lot of thinking from a strategy perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So, in terms of the data that you're looking to capture, I imagine if you can scale the concept of what you're doing out into a big marketplace, which includes 100 plus accelerators, incubators, that would be a nice number probably to target. Maybe 20 to 30 might give you a nice little mass number to get real insight as to what the products are doing and the data is. What's your intent with that data? How might you actually support the accelerators and incubators to make better decisions or to support their founders with the absorption? I think that's quite important and powerful. Are they absorbing what we're putting to them? Are we too future focused? Where is it we're landing for our people, and are we supporting them? How is that coming together? What's the thinking there?
I can answer this question in two parts. I call it micro and macro. So at the micro level, it's really how does it affect the startup itself? So if I have the profile data of the startup, if I have the strategic cash flow, I have sensitivity analysis, I have the key ratios that investors look for, I have the return on investment. If I, as a mentor, has all these information about the startups, I can then provide actually quite targeted kind of intervention, and then I can advise the startups to say, okay, so in your next lean experimentation, what do we need to look out for? So all these data, because they are already in a structured fashion, so it's very easy for the incubators and accelerators to use them to give tailored intervention. So that's what I call the micro. If we kind of have 30, 40, 50 incubators and accelerators doing that, we can roll up the data to an ecosystem level. So we can do benchmarking, so we can understand, okay, what kind of interventions actually work better for what kind of startup founders. We can also learn from each other better in terms of best practice. Why is this incubator generating better success rates than another one, for example? So that's macro. But there's also a part around the justification of value add. So if we capture the strategic cash flows of all the startup founders that goes through all these incubators and accelerators, we can actually quantify the estimated value add of all these institutions on the economy, right? So because a lot of these incubators and accelerators are either funded by government or they are funded by maybe VCs. They are the VC arms of the...
It's important to understand that dynamic. What's the return on investment for the accelerators and incubators, and what are they churning out?
Correct.
It makes a lot of sense in terms of that data.
Correct.
It's important.
Correct. Yeah, because I mean, even if I'm giving, as a government, I'm giving money to the startup ecosystem, where should I place my bets? And why should I be placing my bets? Should I be placing it on this incubator or that? I think now the basis of allocating funding is not based on that level of clarity of, okay, what is your track record in value adding? So that macro piece also has that function of, the government being able to use that to ascertain value add and also where they should be allocating resources, in addition to benchmarking, comparison of best practices, etc.
So for you, why do you get up in the morning? I always like to ask this question. What drives you? Because you've got a smile on your face and you've got some passion behind you. What drives you to make this change and want to support the ecosystem around startups? And effectively, you're supporting startups in the end and people that are starting business and ventures. The accelerators and incubators are a vehicle to get them through and actually maybe potentially have a more successful experience, which is why you're trying to help. What drives you?
To me, I view this as a puzzle, and I just keep thinking, and likewise with Yvette, both of us keep wanting to crack the puzzle. We are not fixated or wedded to the idea that our way is the only way to solve the problem of high startup failure rate and maybe an inefficient allocation of resources. But we really, really, really want to solve the puzzle of how can we enable higher rate of startup success. Because it is, to me, mind-boggling, right, that we have such a high startup failure rate. But it's of course because the nature of new businesses is that there's uncertainty. So there will be failure
It's
rate,
always going to be that,
undeniably.
definitely. Yeah, that's always going to be there.
Yeah, yeah. But can the situation be improved if we are able to collect data that makes sense, quality data, good data that helps us make better decisions? And now with the technology ripening with AI, can we do more with that? So that's what drives me in the morning. I mean, I really want to crack this puzzle in the way that we feel is best suited.
Makes sense. What does success look like for the Biz Lab? What does that mean? What is success for you? What's the target you're working towards?
So just now I mentioned micro and macro. So we already have some traction with incubators and accelerators, and we have tested out the micro level. So we know that works well. Our aspiration is to actually penetrate more geographical markets so that our macro vision can be realized. Actually, just as a side note, this entire idea was birthed actually in Gold Coast Innovation Hub. So
Well, there
many
you
years
go. So you're
back,
part of an innovation accelerator, incubator. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So actually, so Yvette, we worked with Sharon, and actually she has a lot of foresight, and a lot of these ideas were a result of working with her. So we also so she Innovation Hub is a good example that actually the macro vision can be realized, but it has no impact if it is just one or two incubators and accelerators doing the work. The real power will come when actually there's a lot of these incubators and accelerators collecting similar data so that we can have better insights across the whole ecosystem. So that's our aspiration.
The goal, rise all boats. So help everyone. You have a better ecosystem,
Yes.
drive more innovation across countries, the globe, so we can become better in
Yeah.
different areas. Because, yeah, globally, I think we've been focused on commercial dollar, and that's what most things are thing. But that's starting to shift, and founders starting to change, and there's a lot of organisations that are out there for good, and all these practices. And how do we drive that innovation? Because that's important too for all of us. So, how do we help everyone succeed? There's plenty of room. There's plenty of room out there, so
Yeah.
it's important. So, it really
Yeah.
insightful as to where you're going and what you're trying to achieve. Dr. Yong Xing Ning, I really appreciate you joining us on the DevReady podcast and sharing everything about the Biz Lab. Hopefully that's been a lot of value for our listeners because there was some great insights just for founders. If any founder wants to reach you directly, could they reach you directly and start utilizing these tools? I think there's some great value. And if there's any accelerators and incubators listening out there, it might be worth a conversation.
So they can reach us at our website, www at thebizlab.io. Sorry.
www.thebizlab.io. Just so everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Or via email, hello at thebizlab.io.
Perfect. No, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on, and I wish you all the best in your journey because it is a journey for everyone. And I hope there's many success in supporting the ecosystem because the DevReady podcast exists to support the ecosystem. And we hope we helped a little bit to get your name out there and support the ecosystem a little bit further. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Very much appreciated.